Hey, welcome to the Nameless Blog. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Berkeley, aka Kyle Berkeley, aka Kyle S. Berkeley, aka Slope to Pisces, Raw Slope, and KB. Insert any name that you may know me by from the streets, from the book tour, or in general from music or anything like that. Um, I can be found on all forms of social media at Berkeley for Us, except on Facebook. On Facebook, I am Kyle Berkeley 83 for whatever reason. So there you go. But you also can find me at Dr. Kyle Berkeley on Facebook. Same person. If you type in Dr. Kyle Berkeley, it comes straight to me, and that's my page. That being said, welcome to the weekly episodic version of the Nameless Blog. And what a week! What a week it has been. There are split people about a war that's going on in the Middle East. There's still issues with Ukraine and Russia. And as always, we have issues right here in America that seems to not be making major news. We'll get into that shortly. Let's talk. Let's clean house a little bit with the book stuff, right? So here we see the legacy. Yay! Um, so the union is coming out in a few short weeks, and I had a very high praise coming from my editor, the award-winning Karen Rogers, and it really feels great because there was a lot of work and a lot of effort. I wrote 11 different versions of this book um, before I was like, this is the one. And like when I say 11 different versions, I'm telling you, I got like 20, 30 chapters in. And it was like, no, that's not it. And with scrap. And that happened 11 times. And I have a file drive that could show every last one of those versions that exist. If this is a whole Marvel, I like the TV show Loki. This is a Loki thing. There's a lot of variants of Tiffany and her storyline. It's just a whole multiverse of things. Sadly, this isn't that kind of a story where I can play with multiverses and stuff like that, but I can play with Tiffany psychosis. And do that, I have been doing this whole series. So, um, just to bring some things full picture as we are gearing up for the whole holiday rollout for Bold Print and for The Wake, The Void, The Legacy, and out in a few days, The Union. Let's take a look at the timeline. So in 2016, the events of The Wake that came out in 2018 happened. So again, let me put this out there. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read The Wake, the Void, or The Legacy thus far. Mild spoiler alert. I'm not going to spoil who is AFK, the action figure killer. I'm not going to spoil a lot of things that go on with Marshawn Bell in The Void. But there are some storyline deets I might give away in this. More so just because I want to give an idea of the timeline of things. So going into the union, it's good to know about the timeline of what happened in the past. So in 2016, there was a star football player named Tyrone Clinton, who is Sasha Green's son, who was murdered in a botched armed robbery. He was bullied by a person in the neighborhood who did a lot of gambling on the football games to rob a pizza joint over in the Ritchie Square community. And a lot of that story came from a real life robbery that happened at a pizza, I think it's called Pizza Express, which is over in the Lakeland area. And that story was very interesting when it did happen years ago. And so I told a fictitious version of it, mixed in with the story. It's a lot of different stories mixed up in there of things that really happened. My real good friend Proc, who's a comedian, We actually had a chance when he and his son read the way he knew about the story, which is crazy, because we was able like to talk about it with his son. It was like a real good bonding moment. But anyway, in 2016, that was one of the events that kicked a lot of things off in the community for the downfall, along with the death of Donald Avery, who was a pastor and a community leader, um, Florence Sims, who was Tiffany's grandmother and was also a community leader. So you had those two major deaths. You had the death of Silk, who is the biological child of Erica Little, and I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So Silk is a trans character, and Silk had one of the most interesting chapters in the book because with Silk's story, I'm able to shed light on really how hard it is and the discrimination that a lot of trans people will face when they're trying to find employment, because Silk went from being a very prominent radio personality to sleeping with the boss's husband to then becoming homeless. And from homeless, she started sex working. While sex working, she meets Gina Sims, who is Tina Sims' mother, who is Tiffany's aunt. Okay. So, in the course of this time, Tina, who doesn't have any relationship with her biological mom, Gina, who's very active in her addiction at this time and is also sex working to pay for her addiction, and some kind of way have made herself a de facto mom to Silk. Is they're both in the um, old marketplace area sex working. And while that's going on, Tiffany's father was a frequent customer of Silk and he murdered Silk. And then a lot of things come out about Erica Little not really accepting Silk's sexuality. And that becomes a point of contention to stop the community redevelopment projects that Titan Industries had in place. Also, you had the murder of a very, very respected police officer named Edward Carter, who was who was not just a police officer, but he was also a football coach, who was Tyrone Clinton's football coach. And he was shot and murdered by two people who were thought to be protesters after the death of Tyrone Clinton, who tried to give himself up during a botched armed robbery, and the police saw a firearm and they shot and killed him because they reacted the best way they could in that scenario, because the only thing they know was he had a firearm. It was a very intense situation. And that led to the police chief at the time, Alex Tillman, feeling under pressure because there's actually two young men that were murdered within a very short period in the week. And Alex Tillman was basically fired because he had a real angry outburst because Edward Carter was murdered. Alex Tillman was the person that returned fire to two gunmen that shot at Edward Carter. And, there's riots and everything going on. 2017, you find out this is the timeline. So Events of the Void, it happens in 2017. You find out that the two people who had opened fire on Edward Carter and by de facto Alex Tillman were actually members of the Alphas, and they were hired by Marshawn Bell to kill Edward Carter because Edward Carter learned that Alex Tillman knew that there was something up with the Narcotics and Firearms Task Force, and he was working to promote Edward Carter and have him kind of lay somewhat of a watchful, stern eye on Marshawn Bell. So in retaliation, because Marshawn Bell didn't want his illegal activities to stop, shot and killed. To he put out a hit. He paid for a hit against Edward Carter, who he knew was at the hospital for the second person, Kennard Laws Bay, that was shot and killed by a police officer. But at the time, he was fighting for his life, Kennard Laws Bay. at University of Maryland, and while he's at University of Maryland Medical Center, that's when the shooting happened. Now, what gets interesting about all this time, about everything that happens in this timeline, is you do learn that there are a few things that go on. One of the things is you learn that Marshawn Bell has been working with a gang called the Alphas, and what they've been doing is the Narcotics and Firearms Task Force have been raiding the homes of a rival gang called the Cabal, taking drugs and guns and money from those homes and selling the drugs to the Alphas. And Marshawn Bell was pocketing that money to pay for his mother's cancer treatment. What the other members were doing wasn't really a major focus in the book, just because I really wanted to hone in on the Marshawn Bell and another character who was a member of the Alphas network. Um, and it's more of an interaction between Tiffany and the Alphas and Marshawn Bell, and also action like it's a clash of philosophies between Hakeem and his brother Jamar. So you flash forward, events happen. Definitely not trying to spoil how that book goes. Please pick up The Void. Please pick up The Wake. And then you flash forward to now The Legacy, which happens 2 years after the events of The Void. And in The Legacy, you learn that there has been an FBI investigation because of the events that happened in The Void. Between the Narcotics and Firearms Task Force and with the Alphas, mildly with the Cabal, not so much. There's a whole RICO law thing going on. And while there's a whole FBI investigation trying to bring down all the members of the Alphas and the Narcotics and Firearms Task Force to really make the Pitness case, Gina's in witness protection. That's Tiffany's aunt. And we learned that there's actually been a serial killer that has been doing vigilante justice for a while. And he's been killing crooked politicians, crooked police, and everything else in between. Even one of the police chiefs who was crooked was murdered by this action figure killer. And the reason why he received that name is because at all the scenes of his crimes, he would leave a child's toy, a little green army man, which is why the book cover has the little green army man on it. And yeah, I guess you could see it. I don't know if this thing's doing what it wants to do, but it's there. Ta-da. So that happens. And let's see. You learn a little bit more about Hakeem and Jamar's life growing up, just like how you did a little bit in The Void. You learn that there's some odd stuff that goes on with that family's church, which was brought up in The Wake, it was brought up in The Void, and it's brought up in The Legacy. And you learn about Tiffany's sister, Keisha. Her name is Keisha Stokes. She was married, but her husband, something happened to her husband. I'll leave it at that, and you'll find out more about that in the union. I'm being very careful not to talk about that. But Jamar and Hakeem has a sister. She's a bishop of the church, of the family church, Andrew's Memorial, and you learn that there's something going on with the family, and there's a lot of very specific events in The Legacy that go, oh, wait, what's going on with that family? That family has some stuff going on. Let's learn more about it. And that, my friends, is why the union happens the way how it does. There's a water crisis going on in the city, similar to some things that have happened in real life, with the pipes being outdated, asbestos. There's events that happen in The Legacy, which happen to have lead spread around in various communities in the city. So those communities do need to now be reconstructed. The thing that Tiffany has been fighting against has now kind of come back on her, and it needs to be addressed now. Not saying that her fight was for nothing, but it's like the fight that she's fighting, it has other implications now. It's now got more complicated. So you add in those factors, and then we learn a whole lot about Hakeem's family, because at this point it's all about Hakeem, Jamar, and Keisha and their family, and you find out that that family's church is a religious cult, and we really dive in, right? We really dive in on the idea of what it is to be in a cult in the Black community. How is it that a Black person can wind up in a cult? How is it that several Black people, especially very intelligent Black people, that are very successful, wind up in this cult? And we really deep dive into that and the goods and the bads of that religious cult. And then we find out that there's again another serial killer. This time it's the Charm City Strangler, and that story, it builds on itself, and it goes a very cool direction because of how it blends in with everything else going on. And we meet a few cool characters. Just because at this point I am pulling back the curtain with the Flamingo Club and revealing them, because by the time we get to the last book in the series, to transition, it is going to be all about the Flamingo Club. So you're definitely going to learn a, a bits and pieces on how the Flamingo Club works. You're going to learn about certain characters like the current mayor, Hugo Titan, who was the CEO, owner, and founder of Titan Industries. In the void, not the void, in the wake, you met his two twin children, adult children, let's say, Chandler and Chanel Titan. This time around, you briefly get to see them, but it's more about Hugo. At this point, Hugo's the mayor, and he has now stepped down from his role and sold his shares to Erica Little, who now runs and owns Titan Industries, along with her airline company type, Psalms Air. So you have that goes on, right? And now you have Erica Little that has real control to really make change to do this whole gentrification project that she's been trying to do ever since 2016. And now you have the mayor at her disposal, and she now owns the mayor's former company. And so now it's like there's nothing stopping. And we also see some things coming to fruition. Just keep in mind, if you follow the void and follow a lot of things that Jamar was saying, you will understand why the knights. And when you read the Union, you'll get who the knights are, and you'll understand why the knights are such an important piece that was put into play in the Union. There's definitely a lot of character development. There's definitely a lot of things to play on, not just with religion, but with family. Um, the idea of biological birthright versus an adopted child, and the idea of what it means to be blessed in this religious cult's perspective, and the idea of discipline and how they handle things in house. All those things get brought up, which is pretty cool. So just wanted to throw that out there because I'm very excited for this book to come out. This is definitely an amazing piece of art that was done, and it, like I said, I wrote 11 different versions. I could easily show you these files. There's 11 different versions of this book that was written before I was like, hey, this is it, and I was like, this is a freaking masterpiece. And there we are, we are now days away, weeks away from this book coming out. I don't actually have an actual release date yet for multiple reasons, just because we're going through rounds of edits, but it's coming soon. Um, there's a whole Christmas rollout, so we're looking at a few different places that we're going to be doing signings and live sales at. Black Mall is on the list. I think I'm going to do Black Mall in November or December, just because, uh, as a author and owner of Bullprint, you do want to think about the holiday sales. And people love buying books, and this is a great book series. If you like crime drama, if you like the idea of cults and serial killers and um, the strong, independent women leads, and just on how you can grow through trauma, because that is a through line throughout this whole series. Like Tiffany went from being somebody who was sexually molested and assaulted by a father from childhood all the way up into adulthood, um, to being somebody who had to deal with the mental health aspects of it and would find comfort into these hallucinations that she would have, delusions, these voices that she would have. Sometimes they would meet and talk to her in the basement of her grandmother's house, and then eventually they would go and talk to her out in public, and she would respond to them in public. And now it takes another turn, because one thing's for certain, two things for sure. Tiffany has yet to get help for it, and that's a cool theme from this book as well. Because Tiffany hasn't received any help from mental health help from the trauma that she's experienced. So it's pretty cool how Tiffany has gone from opening a restaurant with some of the money that was willed to her from her mom, and not just opening a restaurant, but she also opened up a community bank with Hakeem, Jamar, Keisha, and a few other people, Miss Claire, like some other prominent people in the community, and opened up this prominent Black-owned bank in Baltimore City that's doing well and helping people keep their homes. And then she's doing all this work to help people keep homes and making changes in the community, but you notice she really isn't taking time to take care of herself. And that starts to get exacerbated a lot in the union. Um, but you have to really pay attention, because it's so easy to get caught up in everything that she's doing that you can easily forget, hey, whoa, what are you doing for yourself though? So um, that's a cool thing to definitely keep an eye out for when you read the union. And let's close out with some cool stuff. I'm watching Loki. I'm loving this second season of Loki. It's very dope. Um, the casting is great. Jonathan Majors. How they had this guy playing multiple roles of the same person is so fun. Just because Kang is so interesting in the comics, to have Loki pulling this off, have Jonathan Majors pull this off is really cool. Seeing the character development of Loki, and also knowing that this Loki isn't the same Loki from not Endgame, from Infinity War. This is actually the Loki from Avengers 1 that was shown in Endgame, and how this person had the character develop in a whole different way, branch timeline. It's pretty dope. And how they're playing with time and telling true stories about historical events like the World's Fair. It's definitely fun. H. Holmes. Okay, all right. So reason why I brought Loki up. There's something that goes on with H. Holmes. So I had to do a lot of research when I wrote this book, right? Beginning, because we're playing with cults. Just like I had to do a lot of research when I wrote Legacy, because we're playing with serial killers, and a lot of that research still helped out um, in the union, because there's still a serial killer aspect in it. So you're looking at. I could give this away because this is perfectly fine. So yeah, I did a lot of research in, uh, let's say, Joe Polzinski, right, and the Mannequin Killer, which was a person who did some murders over Oak Ridge, Maryland, and there was a few other people I really wanted to do some research in. Wayne Williams, There's a lot of churches, just like the Fellowship Church up in New York City, which was a cult for lack of a better word. Um, there's a documentary on HBO called The Rundown. So I had to do some research on the Revenant Church, which I did a lot of deep diving into that. Um, Nexium. Like when I tell you there's a lot of cults I deep dived in, I think I went through about 15 to 16 different books about cults. I can't tell you how many audio books and podcasts. Shouts out to two specific podcasts that helped out big time with breaking certain things down. First is Small Town Murder, because they did do a case on the church cult up in New York, which I was able to play and bend with a little bit in the series, and time suck with Dan Cummings because he has done a lot of episodes on different cults, and I was able to pull from a lot of information and weave and bend that in perfectly. And of course, finding court files from certain lawsuits. I don't want to get into that because that could actually be harmful or hurtful to some people who actually know that are part of some of those ministries in real life. So I'm not going to really divulge that. But it was cool with the H.H. Holmes piece in Loki because while doing all that research, there's two characters who own a hotel, and what I didn't want to do was create a Bates Motel scenario, so I purposely stayed away from that kind of thing. But I did like the idea of what was up with H.H. Holmes, and I played with that idea just a tiny bit, just a tiny bit. Not too much. Didn't want to go overboard with it, but um, I did want to do that. Okay. My daughter went with the iPad. Yeah. Um, so my daughter's hopping on here on the iPad. So I'm going to sign off in a second. And I just want to say, hey, check me out on social media. If there's anything you want to talk about, any TV shows, any insight, any of the books, anything like that, please let me know. If there's something that you want me to talk about on this weekly cast, let me know. I would love to. And melting. Oh, we have. I'm at Berkeley for Us on all forms of social media. I'm Dr. Kyle Berkeley on Facebook. Please follow. Please get a copy of The Way, The Void, The Legacy, coming soon in Union. And thank you all. I love my white shoes. Create